Number 1.
I want to share with you a crazy story that I was recently told by my grandmother. It happened to her many years ago when she was 18 years old. She lived in a small village in Russia, and her parents had a farm. One weekend, she decided to go to a dance with her friends. To get to the dance, they had to walk through the fields. Since they were out in the country, there were no lights, and it was pitch black. There were 6 girls altogether. As they walked home through the fields, in the darkness, they noticed that something was following them. It was a large, stray dog, and they were afraid that it was going to bite them. The girls tried to drive the dog away by shouting at it and throwing stones, but all to no avail. One of the girls shouted at the dog, "I'll get my father's gun and come back tomorrow and blow your head off." Just then, the dog stopped in its tracks, looked directly at her, and in a human voice, it said, "Not if I get you first." All of the girls started screaming and they scattered in terror. They didn't stop running until they got home. My grandmother said it was terrifying. At first, I did not believe my grandmother, but she swears that she saw it with her own eyes and heard it with her own ears. The next day, the girl who shouted at the dog was up on a ladder, helping her father fix the roof of her house. She fell off and landed on her head. She was paralyzed from the neck down for the rest of her life. My grandmother always said, "Never threaten a stray dog."
Number 2.
This happened to a friend of mine named Johnny. When he was 8 years old, he went to a birthday party. They started playing a game of hide and seek. The birthday boy started counting to 100. The other kids ran off to hide. Johnny ran down into the basement and hid under a futon. While he was crouching in his hiding place, he heard a creepy voice behind him say, "Shh." Johnny freaked out and ran up the stairs before the birthday boy finished counting. Everyone was angry at Johnny for ruining the game, and they had to start over. This time, Johnny ran into the bathroom to find a hiding place. He opens the closet and found a creepy old man hiding in there. The old man told him to be quiet, but Johnny freaked out and ran to the birthday boy's parents. They immediately called the cops. Apparently, a homeless man had broken into the basement and had been sleeping under their futon, eating the food and using the shower while the family was out.
Number 3.
My great-grandmother told me about her uncle. He was deathly afraid of horses, and he always claimed they weren't what they seemed. Apparently, when he was a boy, he was walking home alone, and as he came over the top of a hill, he looked down into the valley below. He saw 2 horses walking side by side on their hind legs, like people. They continued to walk until they came to a fence, which they climbed over. They continued to walk for a distance, and then they got down on all fours and began grazing.
Number 4.
The scariest moment of my life took place when I was 8 years old. On the street where I lived, there was a vacant lot, and next to that, there was an abandoned house. You could see it from my bedroom window. My friend and I were playing in my bedroom. We were obsessed with Nancy Drew books, so we pretended we were girl detectives. We had binoculars and made up a story that there was dangerous criminals hiding out in the abandoned house, and it was our job to catch them. We were having a lot of fun playing detectives, and pretty soon, we were on the steps of the house. I was trying to be brave, so I turned the door handle and was about to go inside. All of a sudden, I had a terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. I looked at my friend, and she was scared as well. We stopped playing detectives and ran off home. 2 days later, there were a bunch of police cars outside the abandoned house. It turned out that 2 convicted murderers had escaped from prison, and they had been using the house as their hideout. I have no idea what would have happened if I had opened that door, but I still dread to think about it.
Number 5.
When my grandfather was a child, he lived out in the countryside. Every day, his parents would send him to a nearby forest to collect wood. Sometimes, when he was in a remote part of the forest, he would meet a young boy. The boy was around the same age as him. After a few days, my grandfather became friends with the boy. But the boy was very strange. He told my grandfather his name and where he came from. The boy would just appear abruptly out of nowhere and disappear abruptly when my grandfather would have his back turned. Every time my grandfather went into the forest, he would meet the boy at the same spot. One day, my grandfather went to the spot looking for his new friend, but strangely, the boy never arrived. After a few days, when the boy didn't show up, my grandfather became very worried about him. He began to walk deeper into the forest. He had only walked a few feet when he came across an abandoned cemetery.
Number 6.
A few years ago, I was sharing a house with my roommate. We didn't know each other very well, and we worked at different times, so we didn't see each other much. It was a nice little cottage that had been built in the 1920s. Almost from the moment I moved in, I would hear noises of crying, sobbing, and choking coming from the bathroom. When I knocked at the door and asked if everything was okay, no one would answer. I just assumed my roommate was upset or sick and wanted to be left alone. This went on for months. Then, one day, my roommate and I were sitting in the living room, and she asked if I was feeling okay. Yeah, I'm fine. Why do you ask? Well, it's just that I heard you crying in the bathroom this morning, she said. I thought that was you, I said. That was when we realized, for the past couple of months, both of us had been hearing the crying in the bathroom, and both of us thought it was the other one. We never figured out where the sounds were coming from.
Number 7.
My friend was playing rugby at a local pitch, and it was his job to lock up the changing rooms. By the time he'd finished, it was dark outside. He started walking home, and he noticed a figure standing at the other end of the field. He thought it was just some guy walking through the park, but then the figure started walking across the field towards him. My friend just stood there looking, and the figure started speeding up until it was actually running towards him at full speed. At this point, My friend was a bit freaked out. That was when the worst part happened. The figure suddenly seemed to drop forward onto all fours, and it was still running at full speed. It was wearing a coat, or a cloak that was trailing behind him. My friend turned and ran as fast as he could towards the parked car. When he got to his car and jumped in, he turned back to look at the field, but there was nothing there. After my friend described this to me, I actually couldn't sleep for 2 nights straight. He told another friend of mine who used to walk her dog at the same park, and neither of us has gone back there since.
Number 8.
My mother runs a large daycare facility. One day, in the middle of story time, a 4-year-old boy suddenly started screaming and crying. My mother tried to calm him down and asked him what was wrong. My mommy isn't coming to pick me up," he said. My mother kept consoling him and telling him to calm down. "Your mommy's at work," she said. "When she finishes work, she'll come to pick you up." My mommy isn't coming. My mommy is dead," the boy kept insisting. Half an hour later, the boy's grandma came to the daycare. She was in tears and told my mother that the little boy's mom had just been killed in a car accident. All of the staff in the daycare witnessed this, and it still gives me chills.
Number 9.
My friend told me a story that happened to the mother of a friend of his. She was the only one in the house at the time, and she was getting ready to do a load of laundry in the basement. She opened the basement door and was halfway down the stairs when she happened to look out the window. She saw a man with a knife standing outside the window, peering in. Terrified, she ran up the stairs, locked the basement door, and called 911. When the police arrived, they found the guy down in the basement. She hadn't seen a man standing outside the window. She had seen the reflection of him hiding under the stairs.